There are things that happen before a movie begins. Things that happened in real life, in real rooms, with real men who had real reasons for everything they did. And those reasons, the actual reasons, are almost never the ones that end up on screen. Casino is one of the greatest films Martin Scorsese ever made. It is a picture built with extraordinary precision and care. The performances, the atmosphere, the way it captures the texture of a world that operated just below the surface of everything that was visible and legal and legitimate in Las Vegas during the 1970s. All of it is remarkable. But every film makes choices. Every film has to compress and shape and simplify a story that in real life had no clean beginning, no clean arc, and no single explanation for anything. And there is something about the character of Nicky Santoro, specifically about why he was sent to Las Vegas in the first place, that the film never fully explained. Something that changes the entire story if you understand it the way it actually happened. The movie wants you to believe that Nicky was sent to Las Vegas to watch over Ace, to be his protector, his muscle, his insurance policy in a city full of people who would smile at you while they figured out how to take everything you had. And there is truth in that, but it is not the whole truth. Not even close. The whole truth is more complicated and more dangerous, and it starts not in Las Vegas at all. It starts in Chicago. To understand why Tony Spilotro, the real man behind the character of Nicky Santoro, was sent to Las Vegas in 1971, you have to understand what the Chicago outfit was at that moment in American history. The Chicago outfit controlled virtually every casino worth controlling in Las Vegas. The skim, the illegal diversion of casino profits directly into mob coffers before the numbers were ever recorded for tax purposes, was worth millions every single year. This was not a side operation. This was not a convenience. This was the central engine of the outfit's financial existence. 4 casinos on the Las Vegas Strip, the Stardust, the Fremont, the Hacienda, and the Marina, were quietly, invisibly, and ruthlessly controlled by men in Chicago who never needed to set foot on the casino floor. The man they had running those casinos from the inside was Frank Lefty Rosenthal, the real man behind the character the movie calls Ace Rothstein. Brash and disciplined in equal measure, Rosenthal oversaw the theft of millions in cash from the Stardust Hotel at the direct behest of the Chicago outfit's leadership. He was a genius with numbers. He understood gambling the way a surgeon understands anatomy, not as a game, but as a system with pressure points and vulnerabilities and patterns that could be exploited if you were disciplined enough and perceptive enough to see them clearly. The outfit had never had anyone like him, and they knew it. But genius in that world was never enough on its own. Genius needed protection. Genius needed someone standing behind it who could communicate without words, without paperwork, without anything that could be recorded or produced in a courtroom, that the cost of interfering with the operation was a price nobody in their right mind wanted to pay. That is where Tony Spilotro came in. In the early 1970s, Spilotro was sent by outfit boss Tony Accardo to Las Vegas to replace an earlier mob representative named Marshall Caifano. He was tasked with protecting the outfit's secret interests in the casinos, the skim, the operation, the entire invisible infrastructure that was generating millions of dollars every single month for bosses who lived in Chicago and preferred to keep it that way. Now, and this is the part, the movie simplifies the official version of that assignment. Sounds straightforward. Protect Lefty, protect the skim, keep things running, be the muscle so the money keeps moving. That is how Casino presents it. That is the version that makes dramatic sense on screen, the version that centers the friendship between the two men and gives the story an emotional logic. But the real assignment was more layered than that. And the layers are where the truth lives. Tony Spilotro had been sent to Las Vegas by the outfit as its outside representative, the street-level enforcer whose job was to stand around the casino operation like a wall, keeping threats out and keeping the money moving. Frank Rosenthal was the inside man. He lived within the legitimate structure of the casino business, managed the operations, handled the numbers, maintained the public face of the enterprise while the money quietly disappeared out the back door every month. Spilotro was the force that existed in the shadows around that operation, enforcing, intimidating, and solving the kind of problems that could not be solved with a spreadsheet. The distinction matters enormously, because it means Spilotro's job was never simply to babysit Frank Rosenthal. It was to protect an operation worth millions of dollars per month to the most powerful criminal organization in the American Midwest. Every month, according to those who were inside the operation, $1 million was being skimmed from the slot machines alone. Another $75,000 from the table games. Month after month, year after year. Think about what that number means in 1971. Think about how much of the outfit's entire financial infrastructure depended on that number continuing without interruption. And then think about what kind of man you send to make sure nothing ever threatens it. You do not send someone careful. You do not send someone diplomatic. You send the most dangerous man you have. You send the man whose reputation alone is enough to make other men reconsider whatever they were about to do. Spilotro's savage tendencies and a long string of beatings and killings attributed to him had made him revered and feared within the Chicago outfit for years before Vegas. Despite his small physical stature, he stood just 5 feet 4 inches tall. He had risen within the organization to a level most men twice his size never reached. He had been making people disappear since his early 20s. By the time he arrived in Las Vegas, the FBI believed he was responsible for at least 22 murders. 22, and those were only the ones they could connect to him. That is who the outfit sent to protect their investment. Not a babysitter, not a bodyguard. The most feared enforcer they had produced in a generation. Here is where the movie makes its first significant simplification. Casino shows Nicky arriving in Las Vegas as Ace's friend. As his protector, yes, but fundamentally as someone whose presence in Vegas is explained through the lens of personal loyalty and shared history. And it is true that Spilotro and Rosenthal had a genuine friendship that went back to their childhoods in Chicago. They had grown up in the same world around the same people, absorbing the same lessons about how power worked and what it cost to be without it. That friendship was real, but friendship in the world these men operated in was never the reason for anything official. It was a coincidence, a convenience. The reason Spilotro was sent to Las Vegas was not because he and Lefty Rosenthal were close. The reason was the skim. The reason was always the skim. The movie collapses friendship and assignment into a single, emotionally coherent story. In doing so, it obscures something important about what the outfit actually expected from Tony Spilotro and why ultimately he failed so catastrophically to deliver it. Officially, when Spilotro arrived in Las Vegas, he took over a gift shop called the Gold Rush on West Sahara Avenue. That is what he told the world. A man with more than 24 murders behind him, a man who had been putting people in the ground since his early 20s, was running a jewelry and gift store in Las Vegas, Nevada. And for a little while, the cover held. The money kept moving. The casinos kept producing. The bosses in Chicago kept collecting. But Tony Spilotro was not built for invisibility. That was the fatal problem the outfit had created for itself the moment they chose him for this particular assignment. Widely reported accounts from law enforcement officials who tracked Spilotro during his Vegas years suggest that the city's gangland murder rate increased dramatically after his arrival. Whether any specific figure holds up under statistical scrutiny, the underlying reality is undeniable. Tony Spilotro changed the temperature of Las Vegas. He could not help it. Violence followed him not as a calculated tool he deployed strategically, but as a natural condition of his presence. And more dangerously, he got bored. The outfit had sent Spilotro to Las Vegas to be invisible, to be a silent force standing behind the casino operation, keeping the skim flowing, solving problems quietly and without publicity. What he did instead was build his own crew. He formed a burglary ring that would become known in the press as the Hole-in-the-Wall Gang, named for their method of drilling through the exterior walls and ceilings of the homes and businesses they robbed. He ran the crew out of the gold rush, using the shop as a front to fence stolen merchandise. He put his name in newspapers. He put his face in courtrooms. He made himself, and by extension the entire operation, visible in exactly the way the outfit had specifically sent him to Las Vegas to prevent. By December of 1978, his visibility had become so acute that the Nevada Gaming Commission added Anthony Spilotro to its Black Book, the official list of individuals barred from setting foot in any licensed casino in the state of Nevada. For the man whose entire reason for being in Las Vegas was to protect the outfit's casino interests, this was not just an embarrassment. It was a fundamental, structural failure of the assignment. The outside man could no longer get inside. The wall the outfit had built around their operation had become a liability to the operation itself. And then there was the other thing. The thing the movie does show but does not fully explain in terms of what it meant to the men back in Chicago who were watching all of it happen. At some point in the early 1980s, Tony Spilotro began an affair with Jerry McGee, the wife of Frank Lefty Rosenthal, the wife of the man Spilotro had been sent to Las Vegas specifically to protect. Read that carefully. Not just the fact of the affair, the specific architecture of what it meant within the context of the original assignment. Spilotro had been sent to Las Vegas to stand beside Rosenthal, to be the force that kept the operation and the man running it secure from outside threats. And instead, he was betraying him in the most personal way imaginable. When Jerry eventually confessed to her husband about the affair, Rosenthal made a decision that speaks volumes about the reality of his situation. He told her not to let Tony know that he knew, because he was afraid that if Spilotro found out that Rosenthal had learned about it, Spilotro would kill them both. That is not a friendship straining under pressure. That is a man living in genuine fear of the person who was supposed to be his protector. The affair was an act of personal betrayal, but to the outfit bosses in Chicago, it was something even more corrosive. It was evidence that Spilotro had stopped caring about the rules, that he had stopped caring about the operation, that he had become so consumed by his own appetites and his own private empire in Las Vegas that the job, the actual job, the reason they had sent him there had ceased to matter to him at all. And there is one more detail that Casino gestures toward without fully landing. In October of 1982, someone planted a bomb beneath Frank Rosenthal's car in the parking lot of a restaurant on East Sahara Avenue. The bomb detonated when he started the engine. Rosenthal survived by extraordinary chance. A metal plate installed by General Motors beneath the driver's seat absorbed much of the blast. No one was ever charged. But the list of suspected individuals included Tony Spilotro. The man sent to protect Frank Rosenthal may have been the man who tried to kill him. William Romer, the FBI agent who spent years tracking Spilotro across Chicago and Las Vegas, put it as plainly as it can be put. He told the Los Angeles Times that Spilotro simply was not doing his job in Las Vegas. That statement contains the entire truth of what went wrong. Not doing his job. Not the job the outfit had given him. Not the real job, the invisible job, the quiet job, the job that required a discipline Tony Spilotro was constitutionally incapable of. He had attracted too much attention from law enforcement. He had been blacklisted from the casinos he was supposed to be protecting. He had built an unauthorized criminal enterprise on the side. He had betrayed the man he was supposed to protect. And he had done all of it so publicly, so relentlessly, and so without apparent concern for the consequences that the bosses in Chicago had run out of patience and run out of options. In January of 1986, the leadership of the Chicago outfit met and reached a unanimous decision. Every man in that room agreed. There was no debate, no argument mounted in Spilotro's favor. The man they had sent to Las Vegas 15 years earlier to be their most important instrument in the most lucrative operation the outfit had ever run, that man had become something they could no longer afford to keep alive. On the 14th of June, 1986, Tony Spilotro and his brother Michael were summoned back to the Chicago area under the pretense that Michael would be formally inducted into the outfit. They drove to a meeting they believed was a celebration. What was waiting for them was the opposite. Court testimony later provided by Nicholas Calabrese, an outfit member who cooperated with federal prosecutors, established that the brothers were beaten to death in a basement in Bensonville, Illinois. According to that testimony, Tony Spilotro understood in his final moments what was happening to him. He asked if he could say a prayer. The most feared enforcer the Chicago outfit had produced in a generation, a man whose name had made other men physically afraid, a man who had looked into the faces of others in their final moments more times than anyone around him could count. In his own last moment, he asked for a prayer. Their bodies were transported to a cornfield in northwest Indiana and buried 5 feet underground. They were found days later when a farmer noticed disturbed earth along a rural highway. They were buried in their underwear. The movie shows this. The cornfield, the baseball bats, the burial casino does not shy away from the brutality of how it ended. But what the film cannot fully show, what no film could fully show, is the distance between who Tony Spilotro was sent to Las Vegas to be and who he actually became. The movie tells you that Nicky Santoro was sent to Vegas to watch over Ace, to be his friend, his protector, his oldest connection in a city full of strangers and angles and people who wanted something from everyone they met. The truth is that Tony Spilotro was sent to Las Vegas to protect something far larger and far less personal than a friendship. He was sent to protect a machine, a financial operation worth millions of dollars per year, to an organization that did not traffic in sentiment or loyalty beyond what was useful to the bottom line. He was sent there to be invisible. He became the most visible mobster in the city's history. He was sent there to protect the operation. He became its single greatest internal threat. He was sent there to stand beside Frank Rosenthal. He betrayed him in the most personal way possible and may have tried to kill him. Casino is a masterpiece. It earns every frame of its 3 hours. But the friendship between Nicky and Ace, as real as it was, as genuinely felt as it appears on screen, was never the reason Tony Spilotro got on a plane to Las Vegas in 1971. The reason was $1 million a month coming out of slot machines before anyone with a clipboard could write the number down. Everything else, the friendship, the betrayal, the affair, the violence, the baseball bats in an Indiana cornfield, everything else was a consequence of what happened when the wrong man was sent to do the right job. And the outfit, in the end, settled the account the only way they knew how,